So, Godzilla X Kong, The New Empire, finally came out in Japan a few days ago. And I thought since the first video on my channel was a Godzilla kind of first impressions for minus one, I may as well keep up the trend. And yeah, I watched the movie last night, and yeah, my initial reaction is it's a goofy movie, like maybe to its own detriment, but and it's definitely more of a Kong movie than it is a Godzilla movie, unfortunately. I struggle to decide if I like this movie or hate it. But yeah, I think the biggest issue I have with this movie is just how goofy it is. There have been a lot of complaints about the previous movies, King of the Monsters or Godzilla X Kong, the first one, or mostly those two, or even the original, not the original, but the 2014 Godzilla. There's too many human characters, too many uninteresting human characters, and we spend too much time focusing on them. But I think this movie kind of tried to resolve that issue. Yeah, there are human characters, and they're just as dumb as in previous movies, but yeah, they are kind of necessary to a certain extent. But there's a lot of time in this movie spent with just the monsters, especially Kong. Just Kong and various other creatures not speaking, just grunting and roaring and, of course, fighting, which I kind of did appreciate. I think, yeah, and you kind of saw this with the previous Godzilla vs. Kong movie. My biggest issue with this movie, especially, and I think this is the worst offender, is, yeah, they're too. These guys are huge. Yeah, King Kong and Godzilla are pretty big in these movies. Maybe even too big, if we're being honest. Like, so big that it's kind of ridiculous. But they move much too fast. So I think a lot of the sense of scale is lost in this movie, especially. Because the fight scenes, yeah, they're like, I mean, it's sick. It's awesome to watch. Like, there's some really cool scenes in this movie, but you kind of forget that these things are, like, huge. And I don't know, that's kind of the whole appeal of Godzilla and King Kong as characters. They're moving like little guys, but they're like big guys, you know. They're not little fellas. So that was a little bit disappointing. And we spend a lot of time in this movie in Hollow. I'm trying to avoid spoilers, by the way, but this is vague enough and you would have seen it in the trailers. We spend a lot of time in Hollow Earth in this movie, which I guess I'm not necessarily opposed to, but I think it has the same effect. It's easy to lose the sense of scale, because yeah, they're bigger than the trees, sure, but we don't really have anything to, as a point of reference. So we have these giant monsters, yeah, there's trees, but that's whatever, it's just nature. And then everything in down there's like giant, so you occasionally have a shot with like a human character in it that kind of like reestablishes like how big these things are. But yeah, for me that was my main takeaways. Just the way it's shot and the way the action plays out. I don't think there was enough consideration. I mean, obviously the science is never going to check out, but I think they could have made a better effort to at least make it appear like these giant things were fighting in the city. Speaking of fighting in the city, it's similar to the Marvel problem, but maybe much worse in this MonsterVerse series. Like, are there any cities left in this universe? They fought in Hong Kong. Godzilla was it San Francisco initially? And then in this movie, they like travel from place to place, just destroying every city known to man. So it's like, what are they gonna do in the future? Maybe that's why so much of the movie's in Hollow Earth, and I guess that's a reasonable workaround. I mean, it's not that interesting down there, in my opinion. Sorry. I love the series Monarch. They kind of go into the lore of the world quite a bit, and yeah, it has potential, but this movie definitely doesn't make it look like a very interesting place. Another issue I had with this movie is like Kong himself. I've never been like a huge King Kong fan, but he's always kind of been just this giant ape. Especially like in the Peter Jackson movie, he's just like a giant gorilla, and that was amazing. But in these movies, especially like Kong Skull Island, I thought that was a great movie, and I liked how Kong was represented in that movie. But yeah, in the previous movie, and especially in this movie, he's a bit too, I don't want to say human, but like he's not a giant dumb animal. You know, he's got the axe, which I kind of don't like. He's just a big ape guy, right? You don't give him an axe. I don't like the axe. And he's always walking upright, which could be fine, but he's emoting, you know, he's got the sign language thing going on. Yeah, I don't know. I'd rather he just be this big giant ape rampaging. Yeah, he's always been kind of a sympathetic character, but I think they went too far in making him like this intelligent being. He's like riding on the back of another. Well, in the trailer, you can see he's riding on Godzilla at one point, which was sick, of course. It was amazing. It was cool. But, yeah, I don't like the way he's presented in this movie, especially. And I could even say the same for Godzilla. Godzilla's still just like this big monster that doesn't really care about anything except for fighting other monsters. And, yeah, I actually like that part. And the fights were cool. But, yeah, he emotes a little in this movie, which I think is a no-no for Godzilla. He's just supposed to be like this vacant-faced machine. But yeah, even in the previous movie, he kind of has that grin at one point, which I didn't like. Some people loved it, some people hated it. I hated it. And there's a lot of that in this movie too, unfortunately. Yeah, I was struggling before I started recording to decide if I liked this movie. Well, I definitely don't love it. If I like this or hate it. Yeah, I'm leaning towards dislike now. It's just, it's fun. And yeah, people compare it to like Showa era Godzilla. Just goofy, over the top. Yeah, it is actually that. It's exactly that. It's, the people are there just to give us some context and some reason for all of these monsters to be, you know, in the same scenes together, which, yeah, that's fine. They were necessary. And no one was especially annoying, I guess, in this movie. I mean, they've definitely done worse in previous movies. But for example, King of the Monsters, I thought the way the monsters were presented and like the action scenes and the fights were actually really cool. Like they seemed like these giant, like almost godlike creatures at moments. And in the previous movie, yeah, we kind of lost some of that. But yeah, like the fight in Hong Kong, it still felt like these giant monsters fighting in Hong Kong. But in this movie, like, yeah, there's a few scenes where they appear on land and they're fighting. And like you forget that there's like these tiny people down there because the way the shots are, the way the film is shot, and like the way the action plays out, like there's no consideration for their weight, their mass, their speed, gravity. Like all of these things like really don't check out, and you can only like let so much slide before it's just impossible to, you know, accept as a reality. I realize I'm talking about a movie in which Godzilla and King Kong fight, or join forces, I guess. They don't really fight. I mean, you've seen the trailers. If you've seen the trailers, yeah, don't expect anything more than what's in the trailers, and you won't be disappointed. Yeah, I'll say that. I'm not disappointed in this movie because before I went in, I went with my brother actually to see this, and I told him, yeah, this looks stupid. I know it's gonna be stupid, so let's just see how dumb it is. And yeah, I think when we came out of the movie, we both said it's a little bit more dumb than I expected, but yeah, there are definitely some funny moments, like with the monsters. The human characters are aggressively unfunny, but there's a few scenes where the monsters do like funny things, and I appreciated that. There's a kind of villain monster, and he kind of has a similar issue to Kong. I mean, it's my issue. I don't know if anyone else cares. Yeah, he's like an ape, Scar King. He's like an ape, a giant ape. Yeah, you wouldn't know he was giant though because of the way the movie is shot. But I'm not gonna stress that point too much. He's a bit too human-like. excuse me, they don't talk, of course. That's a given, but he's a bit too human-like, and yeah, we get his motivations and everything through some like human character. I don't know. It's ridiculous, but I suppose the context was necessary. I mean, I think there are a lot of ways they could have approached like having another ape for Kong to fight. I don't know if this was necessarily the best way to go about doing that. There's a lot of monsters in this movie. That's cool. All of them were cool, yeah. None of them were like lame. There's a lot of scenes that don't make sense. Like a lot of scenes where you just have to accept it because it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of that going on, which is sure, whatever. That's fine. Yeah, I did not like didn't like this movie, unfortunately. I want to make a tier list of all the MonsterVerse movies as well as Monarch. I've seen everything except for there's like an animated Skull Island show, so maybe I'll watch that. But yeah, those are just my initial thoughts. It's a goofy movie. I don't know where else you're gonna watch King Kong and Godzilla. I'm not gonna say doing backflips, but it's basically that. Like they're moving in this movie, which I think is a flaw. It doesn't, like, if they're in Hollow Earth, then I'll allow it. Like there's unique rules down there or whatever, but yeah, the way they move around in this movie and just the way it's filmed was kind of disappointing for me. But as a fan of Godzilla, and yeah, I also like King Kong, it was a fun movie. I don't feel like I wasted my money. I saw it in IMAX as well, which is like 2,700 yen. I don't feel like I wasted my money or time, but I don't think I'll ever watch this movie again. I don't think I could recommend it. I would say watch the trailer if you want to see some of it, and then just wait for streaming. Wait for, I don't know, what is it, Disney, Netflix, wherever it ends up. It's definitely a movie, but on this one, I'm thinking it's a pass. Watch almost anything else, and you'll probably do better. Anyway, thank you all. I think I'm gonna make that tier list because that's easy. There's only so many of these films, and I do have a video coming up, a video game video related to video games, not Kong, not Godzilla. But yeah, I just wanted to get my thoughts out. Thank you for watching. Don't be afraid to subscribe if you want to see more. Take care.